Greetings. We now turn to the last page of our first module, which is talking about introductory concepts in comparative politics. And I've titled this page Political Variables, and I'm not sure it's a great title, but I think essentially what I'm going to do on this last page is introduce you to some ways in which power is distributed in a variety of ways. And so maybe I should have called it comparative power distribution or something, but we'll just go with political variables and I'll explain kind of what I mean. If you scroll down in your notes, I've started out with this discussion of unitary versus federal systems. And in the countries that we're going to talk about, one of the things that is going to be analyzed is how is power distributed between the national government and regional local governments. All of the countries we're going to talk about have regional and local governments. In every country we're going to talk about, regional and local governments do really important jobs. But the difference here is, where does this power come from? In other words, do regional governments, whether they're states or provinces or cantons, that's three ways that states are called states, or Länder in Germany, or cities, or whatever it happens to be, do subnational governments get power from the national government? And of course, if that's the case, if the national government grants local governments their power, in theory, they can take it away. Or do local governments, state governments, have an independent power base? Are they granted their power by the Constitution, for example, and therefore the national government cannot take it away? And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So the two ways in which power is distributed between national governments and, I'm going to call them states because that's the term we use in the United States. In a unitary system, the national government has all power and authority. Local governments may have a lot of power. However, that power is not constitutionally granted. Unitary systems are by far the most popular type of allocation of power. As you can see in your notes, about 90% of countries in the world are unitary. Uh, Great Britain is, France is, Japan is. There are a number of unitary systems in the world. People who are fans of unitary systems claim they're more efficient, which I believe is probably true. They work best in small states, particularly if they are relatively homogeneous. When we get to Britain, to illustrate what I mean by the national government having all power and authority, there was a period of time in Britain where Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, actually had the London City Council abolished for a period of time, and then eventually gave it back, just kind of to show who's boss. Now, that would be unthinkable in the United States, that a president could ban or even censure a city council, for example. In the United States, we're in the minority. We are a federal system, and federal states operate in only about 10% of countries in the world. It's actually slightly over 10%. I've rounded down. Examples would include the United States, Canada, and Germany. In fact, people who are fans of federal systems claim that they work best in really large countries, and we see that in the real world. Five of the six largest countries in the world are federal. The only really large country in the world that is unitary is the People's Republic of China. Fans of federal systems claim that they're useful for coping with regional diversity, and I certainly believe that that is true. Through federalism, you can allow subnational governments to do things differently. Again, if you took political science 1 from me, you may remember me talking about how federalism is appropriate in the United States because there are different political culture types in the United States, whether it's the traditionalistic culture of the South, the individualistic culture of the North, or the moralistic culture of the West. Federalism allows state and local governments to be policy laboratories. So states can try something, and if it works, it gets stolen by other states. Workmen's compensation began in California. Recycling efforts began on bottles and cans in Oregon. Women getting the right to vote started in the state of Wyoming. 18-year-olds getting the right to vote started in the state of Georgia. And in all those cases, those ideas spread either nationwide or close to nationwide. In every American government textbook that I've used in my, 35-year career, whatever it's been, they tend to make the value judgment that one of the two is preferable, that either a unitary system is preferable, and that is what the current textbook authors that I'm using in American government, they are big fans of the national government and want state and local governments to be very limited. I used a book many years ago that was a huge fan of federal systems, that was a big believer in state and local power, and was cynical about the national government. I don't subscribe to either of these two approaches. I am not an advocate or a believer that one system is preferable to the other. I think instead of asking the question whether a unitary system or a federal system is better or worse, the better question that I would ask is a unitary system or a federal system appropriate for the country that is being discussed? For example, I think there's no question that a unitary system makes a lot more sense for a country like France, or especially a country like Japan. And federalism makes sense for a country like Germany, that has an even longer history of regionalism than the United States. There is an interesting divide in the German states. The northern states tend to be more liberal and more Protestant. The southern states tend to be more conservative and more Catholic. And federalism allows for that diversity that exists within the country, and for those strong regional loyalties to remain. So when I take a look at our early countries, the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, the first four countries that we're going to talk about in here, I believe all of them are appropriate. That for the United States and Germany, federalism is appropriate, and for Great Britain and France, a unitary system is appropriate. The second political variable that Roskin looks at in Chapter 1 is presidential versus parliamentary systems. Once again, I don't think that inherently there is a better or a worse, although given the political turmoil that the United States has been in over the last 10 or 20 years, a parliamentary system is looking better and better to me. Roskin points out, and I would put some stars here or underlines here, it's something that you could see on the exam. In most countries, the executive branch is the strongest branch of government. The United States is very, very rare, with three very powerful national institutions of government. The U.S. Congress is the most powerful national legislature in the world. It's one of the few national legislatures in the world that can say no on a regular basis to a chief executive and make it stick. The United States has either the most powerful Supreme Court. Some would argue that the German Supreme Court is even more powerful than ours, but certainly the United States Supreme Court is incredibly powerful, and that's very rare in the world. There are very few countries that have a strong Supreme Court. So the United States, one of the subplots of this course And the more we get into this topic, the more you're going to realize that very few countries in the world look very much like the United States. So a lot of people come into this course assuming that because the United States has been stable, has been a world leader, a world power, the most powerful country in the world, that it has been the model for most countries in the world. And one of the things you're going to realize is that most countries operate very differently than we do. When we get to Germany, you're going to recognize some similarities. Federalism is going to look familiar. A strong Supreme Court is going to look familiar. And yet, Germany does not have a presidential system. They have a parliamentary system. Their leader, Angela Merkel, has been the leader of Germany for 16 years now. There is talk she's going to run for another 4-year term, which may mean that Merkel may become the longest serving German leader in the post World War II era. But that official vote, she represents the majority party in the Bundestag, right? In a parliamentary system, the prime minister, in this case, the Germans call their prime minister the chancellor, but essentially it is a prime minister, is typically the leader of the majority party or perhaps the leader of a coalition government. Typically, for example, if you take a look at Great Britain and Germany, on paper, they both appear to be straight parliamentary systems. But one of the big differences is, with rare exception, and there have been a couple, the prime minister in Great Britain is the leader of the majority party, of one party. In Germany, the chancellor has always been the leader of a coalition government. And a coalition government may be two parties, it may be three parties. I know after World War II, in Italy, their prime minister often was heading a coalition of 8 or 9 political parties. And think about how messy that is. Think about how hard it is in the United States for the leader of the Democratic and or Republican Party to keep their members in line. So imagine a leader trying to keep 2 or 3 or 4, or think about poor Italy after World War II, a prime minister trying to keep 7, 8, 9 coalition partners happy. And of course, what that usually meant was the dissolution of the government fairly quickly. So I will do a lot of comparisons when we turn to Great Britain, which will be starting in the next series of mini lectures. The British have a parliamentary system. The United States has a presidential system. I think the strength of the parliamentary system is it's more efficient. Many years ago, when I was directing the Fulbright program, I had an interesting debate. A British political scientist and I decided to have a mock little mini debate about whether the American presidential system was preferable or whether the British parliamentary system was preferable. We decided to confuse the group. I made the case for why I thought the British parliamentary system was better, and he made the case for why he thought the American presidential system was better. And of course, what we were doing was we were taking the other guy's government and praising it, and they were somewhat confused by that. The American political system has checks and balances. It's more stable, perhaps over time. There is a enumerated set of civil liberties and rights in the Constitution for citizens. In Britain, because of fusion of powers, it's more efficient. The majority party can implement their program quickly, and voters know who to hold responsible, who to praise when things are good and who to blame when things are gone, because there aren't those checks and balances that exist in the American presidential system. It is not necessarily that one is better or worse. It is a matter of taste and style. And we will talk a lot about that when we talk about the British system. I move to legislatures in the next video.